Hello and welcome to our event today. My name is Brianna Toner and I'm the Manager of Client Services here at Azul Partners. We have a great event planned for you today, and I am thrilled to be introducing Pawana Burlacote, Global Product Manager at LexisNexis Legal and Professional, and one of our own, Thomas Finn, Senior Research Analyst. We hope to cover everything outlined here on our agenda, but I want to invite you, the audience, to participate as much as you'd like and help direct the conversation with your questions. Simply enter in any inquiries you have in the Q&A widget within the audience console on your screen. It should be on the left-hand side there. Please also take note of the additional resources we have provided for you. That's also on the left-hand side. So before we begin, I'm just going to skip over to this slide right here. In case you aren't familiar with Azul Partners or Spend Matters, I wanted to provide a very brief intro to our brand. The Spend Matters network of sites under the Azul Partners brand is the leading online B2B source for procurement and supply chain news. So Spend Matters, one of the two parent sites, is the world's best and largest information source for procurement and supply chain professionals, enabling CPOs, consultants, and technology solution providers to make smart decisions regarding all things procurement. So our audience is a diverse, mostly executive group of procurement, finance, and supply chain professionals, ranging from Fortune 500 to small startups, which might not surprise you is exactly who we have in attendance today. With that, I'm going to pass it along to Pawana to provide a brief intro to LexisNexis, and then we'll get started. Pawana, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, no problem. Looking forward to it. Again, welcome everybody. So I'm a global product manager at LexisNexis, and we're a leader in providing legal, regulatory, and business content so that our customers can make better decisions and help their customers as well. We are a global organization. We fall under our legal and professional wings of LexisNexis. We serve 175 countries. We have more than 10,000 employees worldwide, and our parent company is Riedel Sevier, also known as RELX. So today, I'm looking at the audience, a very specific focus, although we provide a host of services and products, LexisNexis. Today, we're going to focus mostly around our risk monitoring solutions and what type of content we provide. So we have our screen, monitor, and protect theme around what kind of data do you want to use to monitor risk. It's expansive. So around your PEP data, watch list data, negative news screening, we do one-time due diligence. We also have solutions that apply across supply chain ongoing monitoring. Monitoring of your third-party risk. We have our patented scoring system for risk, and we also provide services and data that our customers can buy from us as well. Okay, that's just a brief introduction of LexisNexis, and I will pass it on to Tom.
All right, thank you. If we look at the evolution of risk in the context of procurement, supply chain, and go down to the application level, it's pretty straightforward evolution. We start off with the static scorecards of old. I'm old enough, in fact, to remember these on 5x7 index cards, where we looked at delivery and quality metrics on some irregular basis, generally, and in fact, running to our suppliers at the end of the quarter, if that was the frequency, to get the information. Soon enough, we put another name on it, Supplier Relationship Management, and more or less the same thing, but more automated, and we added KPIs to delivery and quality metrics. Generally look at these things more frequently, took it a little bit more seriously. Next thing you know, which is more of a recent phenomenon, really, the whole concept kind of folded into supplier performance management, where, again, increased levels of automation. This information is now being tracked in real time. And I think because collaboration became such a prolific buzzword in the industry, the newest providers started to add in project management and project organization capability so that they could bite off specific opportunities with targeted suppliers, strategic suppliers, and manage projects around, for example, an innovation transfer of some sort. Very recently, I think more and more in the logistics area of procurement and supply chain management, there's this concept of risk management. And it was, interestingly enough, introduced as a separate capability, and maybe about as short-lived at an application level as I've witnessed in recent memory, because it seemed like overnight all of this folded into this concept of risk-aware procurement. We've given it the acronym RAP, but it's all kind of folded in a supply chain context into this notion where all of this information and new risk metrics can be folded in, something which I think and is very exciting for procurement, represents really, I think, a coup for the industry because, or for the profession, because if procurement is ever going to be about something more than cost saving, then, as we know, it has to figure out how to physically embed itself across a broader set of business functions. And I do believe that RAP, risk awareness, risk-aware procurement, making people, processes, and systems more risk-aware can help expedite this path, which, again, is why I think it's such a significant new hook for the profession. It not only provides practitioners a new way, a more relevant way to stimulate collaboration with both internal and external stakeholders, but an opportunity to re-educate a far broader organizational audience on how to measure procurement's total value, which I think is highly significant. We go into a definition of risk-aware procurement. Pretty straightforward. It's the integration of these new risk-relevant data for the purpose of improving supply chain management performance. And, you know, within this, of course, it's beyond the regular metrics we've tracked, and a whole new set of financial, political, and reputational metrics, social media information that can be distilled and fed into the matrix, so to speak. Puana, I think it'd be good here, a good insertion point here for you to talk about this in more detail.
Sure. So, the evolution is kind of looking at, as you go through each stage of evolution that Tom took you through, you can see that with each step, you're adding additional layer of data points, right? And you're at a point where you have so much data available to buy or get from external sources, and also your internal metrics that you're tracking for your suppliers, that you have overflow of data. And what the true value comes in is your way of aggregating the data in a way that makes sense for you as an organization. Being able to say, I value financial risk higher than reputational risk, or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you are okay with your political, a little bit risky nature of the location or a political nature of a country where your supplier happens to be, but you're not okay if they tend to engage in unfair labor practices. So social issues are more of a concern for you. So being able to say, this is what matters to me as an organization, this is what I'm going to monitor for and track over time. But at the same time, I don't want to lose context of what type of other risk is available and existing within my supplier base. So having this 360 kind of a holistic view of how many data points can I consume, what are the risk levels coming with those each data points, and how do I make sense of it, and how do I prioritize at the end of the day on which risk areas to focus on. So that is where the true awareness comes, right? It's not just with procurement. You're getting it from your stakeholders internally. You're also identifying your organization's mission and saying, this is the type of risk I'm going to focus on, and these are the type of data points I'm going to acquire so that I can make sense of my true risk exposure. Okay.
Yeah, I think if we were to add on to the definition, just another way of looking at it, companies that are doing this well, have more mature supply and risk management practices, are are now regarded as resilient. And they're more resistant to disruption, less vulnerable, and recover faster than companies clearly that aren't. But keep in mind here that risk awareness is about a company's ability to recognize the risks before they become a threat, mitigate them while they are occurring, and recover from the damages that they're causing more quickly and effectively. On the maturity curve, it's surely a function of moving as far away from a retrospective view, a reactionary view, as opposed to remaining on top of it. When we go forward, and we talk in terms of how did we get here, what's changed. It's interesting. It seems as a profession we kind of got what we wished for as a result of the financial collapse of 2009. We finally got that proverbial seat at the C-suite table, and in fact, board-level visibility in many, many cases. And because everyone is now operating more leanly, the cost of a supply chain disruption is now being recognized as potentially far more devastating. In the past, we kind of managed risk as a function of the way in which we managed inventory. But we're not doing it that way anymore. And if you look at the things that are potential impacts or disruptors, political instability, exchange rates, carriage capacity, all of these things aren't necessarily new, but the associated dangers now are far more top of mind because it seems like supply chain disruptions are daily news. I mean, if you think in terms of the natural and economic disasters and their immediate impacts, while they may be more predictable, we have more advanced notice, they're nevertheless a telling and broadcast problem that is tied back to organizational performance, if not internally, externally, and almost immediately. You go past that to geopolitical and environmental changes, for example. Those are obviously far longer-term impact potentials that need to be reviewed. And then in the short and medium term, of course, you're looking at competitive risks. And, I hate to go straight to Amazon. I mean, we can talk in terms of other disruptive technologies like the internet, smartphones, and barcodes. But when you think in terms of, because I cover it on a daily basis, the threat of a large, well-funded disruptor to a supply chain in terms of its competitiveness, these are things that clearly need to be stayed on top of. And it seems to me, in many regards, has served to redefine or broaden the definition of compliance. Social media these days is connecting us all. We've all got the ability to record an event or stay on top of one. These things become immediately known, and they compel a response. As an older guy, I've been around for a while. I can recall talking in terms of benefits or around corporate social responsibility, environmental responsibility, circular life cycles for various types of high-impact products. And, boy, I'll tell you, a couple, 3 years ago, generally speaking, I'd get a lot of eye-rolling going on and backed off of it. And now it's front and center. The millennials are not the only ones, as I say, that are talking about these things anymore. So if we move forward, how do we get ahead of it? What are the central data relationships, which is where clearly as a starting point, we need to get on top of, which requires some retrospective analysis capability, determining what matters, establishing the right complement of risk-aware, data-driven business processes where we want to get. And, here, Juan, I'd ask you to jump in because it's clearly a situation where more is not necessarily better, and clearly, given the increasing popularity and use of predictive analytic capability, data integrity, consistency, accuracy is absolutely essential.
Correct. So I like the way you phrased, right? So determine what matters. And this is very unique to you as an organization, right? But it's a process that can be applied across industries, across verticals. In that because there is so much data available, there is data for your credit risk, your financial risk, there is data for various regulatory agencies, sanctions list, watch list, you have news, you have licensed news concept, you have web content, you have social media. There is so much chatter, so much news, and so much of the content that you can actually harvest and keep for a period of time that it's easy to just get sidetracked with too much information, and you're going to spend more of your time just parsing the data to say, is this bad for me? Do I need to worry about it? Do I need to do anything? Do I need to alert my stakeholders? So the key to do that is don't fall into the trap of parsing through every single data point. Identify the type of data that would help you understand your overall risk exposure. Right? So this is understanding, am I okay with some risk, because you are living in a competitive environment, you are going to use some of that risk for your competitive advantage. So that is okay with you as long as you're okay with some type of risk but not the others. Or maybe you are looking for a pattern of risk over time, not one event, not one news, explosive news, but you're looking for consistency and looking for trends and patterns over time to say, if I collect this type of data sources, will somebody help me analyze it? For example, not every news is going to come with this red flag, right? It's not going to tell you that it's really bad for you because it has direct impact on your supply chain or your inventory. But some of them are maybe low-hanging news, right? It's just happening, there's a chatter going on, but over time, if that chatter goes from becoming 1 or 10 news a day to becoming hundreds, and then in a week you are getting into thousands, you're going to start paying attention because there is something going on there that needs investigation from you. And it's also not possible to always be doing kind of a reactive thing. Something bad happens, your stakeholder tells you something, or you heard about it in a report, and you go and start digging through your content to say, what happened, let me find out, right? So you need to have this process where you are automating most of this because it's not humanly possible for you to parse through all of this data. But to say, tell me when something is really bad, and maybe you have your own internal algorithm to say what is bad, or you have your third party that you partner with who has an algorithm to tell you when something is bad, and they have a model to prove that a certain pattern of event or certain words or certain rankings lead to eventual doom. Or you could also say, well, let me help determine what that is for me. And at the end of it, what you're trying to do is reduce the noise, reduce the white noise, reduce this this vast content and distractions to say, I'm going to focus on these 3 areas of risk, a financial risk, legal risk, and social risk, because that's what I care about today. That's what my stakeholders care about. And I'm going to mine data, or I'm going to use a system to mine data for me, and only get reactive, jump into action when something is telling me it's bad. So your way of determining is a complete failure bad, or is it a slow decline bad, depending on your tolerance for risk. Again, you determine when you want to jump into action. And around data being clean, right? That's very important, because if you are looking at data that's not complete, or data that does not talk to each other in a consistent way, so you are analyzing wrong data sets and then jumping into wrong conclusion, or you just have imperfect data, right? So you're discarding a lot of the data that comes through because your system or your Excel sheet or your person, whoever you're relying on for your data, tells you that it's not complete. So you are throwing it away, and at the end of it, you are going to do this digging and say, oh, I missed this data point because at that time it wasn't flagged as something I needed to look at. So being able to automate a lot of that process, and a lot of technology is available today. We have thankfully evolved into the stage where none of this has to be your manual work or your manual query, and you rely on the system to flag that. You can never take away the human portion of it, just because only you know what you can tolerate for risk as an organization, and you can read for those signs much better. But the machine is there to kind of guide you to, these are the collection of data I passed through, this is the result, and you are there to interpret what to do with that result. So that's around the accuracy and then the consistency, which is what the machine kind of lends you, this automated system, ongoing monitoring system lends you.
It just seems that a risk context for these data for procurement professionals gives them an obvious, little glass of water here, an obvious context, more powerful context to pull stakeholders together that frankly should be pulled more tightly together. Procurement, supply chain, logisticians, the opportunity to pull these data together, look at supply chain visibility solutions in a risk context relative to, for example, inventory management, using data like estimated time of arrival, for example, and using that as a more accurate reflection of demand, for example, than the heuristics that are traditionally used. And again, looking at it at a far more granular level of detail, where the systems that are governing provide means to react when things change. When I think in terms of changes like that, I think in terms of how RAP or risk awareness can be embedded into workflows, and if it's done enough naturally, the opportunity to start to drive a cultural change and heighten procurement's profile, make it more relevant, is clearly low-hanging fruit, it seems. But keep in mind that RAP done well isn't necessarily about buffering against uncertainty, and this is an important point. Because from an operational perspective, buffering is an inherently suboptimal practice. Got to look at risk management, as we've been saying all along, and you will hear from everyone, as a continuous, proactive, and dynamic process. But, today, while the ability to predict a problem remains rarefied territory, the inability to deal with one that is known, like a major weather event that causes a production closure, where the contingency plans to work around that production closure have not been vetted, seems almost silly. So we move on and we talk in terms of procurement's opportunities even further. I want to kind of go high level here, even higher level, and to underscore what Pawana said. While there is so much data out there are tools that have done logical segmentation that make it digestible in a context, in an application context, in support of a specific objective. That is not necessarily that difficult. I have sat through presentations by some of the newest entrants, generally solutions associated with major branded consultancies, where you would have the impression at the end of the presentation that this is a multi-million-dollar engagement to get our hands around this, and years of sifting through these data for purposes of canceling all of the noise and being in a position to actually know what matters. I don't think it's that difficult. I think there are ways to get started, practical ways to get started, where there are quick wins and the opportunity to develop momentum. Surely, the easiest way to create visibility is to begin the process, as you take these bite-sized chunks, reporting differently and reporting to different audiences. Using risk-aware metrics to embed procurement thinking with new stakeholders, again, a powerful context. And of course, ultimately, using these metrics and using this change that's being driven, this slight tweak to the way in which procurement's profile is currently regarded, is going to have the effect of changing the way procurement's performance is ultimately measured. Where risk management, for example, seeks to understand what might go badly in a project, and that's what managing the risk is all about. The flip side of it is the opportunity management, which is generally viewed as separately. And it's of course designed to look for what might actually have a chance to go better. The opportunity, it seems to me, for procurement professionals to marry these two concepts into a process that becomes more culturally relevant is surely a way to change the way they're viewed and the way ultimately their value is measured, which is, for goodness sake, way past due, it seems to me. Elevating the profession. If we move to the end here, we've said this repeatedly. It's the high-level theme. In order for procurement to accomplish that, it has got to be about something more than cost savings. And we believe risk metrics, physically embedded in procurement thinking, presented to a broader audience, is a phenomenal hook. It's a logical insertion point that can be used right now because it's timely. I say at the end of the day, I'm not sure, in fact, where I read this, but the comment is the risk is inevitable, but remember, it's the irritation that makes the pearl. And it seems that RAP, when done well, not only creates, obvious competitive advantage, but it also secures an organization's ability, and a very important point, to actually profit from unexpected events and gain a leg up against competitors who are not anywhere near as resilient. When you think in terms of the big stuff, recent events, terrorist strikes, political instability in third world countries, even something as straightforward as last year's shutdown of West Coast shipping docks. This stuff is now top of mind. And it needs to be remembered in the same breath that a lot of the pressure on procurement right now to do more with less, to continue to drive cost out of the supply chain, has actually introduced or heightened the risk of managing a supply chain. But having said that, I'd add, don't be led astray by all of the sensational risks that grab our attention, that make the news cycle. Knowing how to deal with a major event, is obviously critical, but you cannot allow that to take precedence or do so at the expense over the smaller risks that have a tendency to gum up the works on a regular basis, or as we say, the moment we allow ourselves to relax, Murphy's Law, so to speak. Those things get subsumed, it seems, in an awareness, a risk awareness, categorized effectively, automatically. And I'll turn it back to Puana just to add your thoughts around why it is that you see such a market for these data such as you provide, in the procurement profession.
Right. So we've talked about, right, just the beginning, and then we'll go kind of full circle around the evolution, right? So we're moving away. Most of the resilient procurement organizations, the powerful ones, are moving away from doing just your success metrics, right? Is this good or bad? You kind of a 5x7 card model. And now most of them are moving onto this automated ongoing monitoring tool. And it is a back and forth information between what your organization, what your stakeholders are telling you is important to them, and finding the data, right? They're also hunters and gatherers of this type of risk data to say, I want to monitor, since my stakeholder cares about social responsibility, I'm going to monitor about, these data points. My other stakeholder cares about financial health of their suppliers. So I'm going to monitor, for the credit data. And you're going to establish those data points and say, and I'm going to put a system in place where I'm going to have this ongoing monitoring. That way, at any point, I am the point of contact for any of my stakeholders when they say, how are my suppliers doing? Are we okay? Are we at risk? And what level of risk are we at? So I have that information. I don't have to take a break and say, let me go find that for you, and I'll come back to you. Right? So this systems, this automated process, this ongoing monitoring is there for you so that you have continuous visibility into where is the risk data. And you can also, as a procurement organization, now start to become the information sharer. Right? You are the messenger now. When you start seeing the flags, you start seeing the trends, and you know what you're looking for based on your tolerance level. You can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm starting to see these certain behavior patterns. And this is now proactive, right? You are seeing this data point coming through. You are seeing these patterns over time. And you're able to go to your stakeholders and say, I'm seeing this. Do you want to investigate this further? Do we need to have risk mitigation strategy in place? So it becomes a conversation between you and your stakeholder, and you are no longer the one who found out something went bad after everybody else knew about it. Right? So this powerful role and how this awareness kind of brings you into this position of being a very powerful organization within your company to say, I know because through the data points that I have access to and the monitoring system I have in place, when things can start to go wrong and when to start doing the yellow flag and the red flag and then the green flag. And my stakeholders can be informed better because of my visibility into all of this risk data points. So I think it's a good evolution, and we have also used, right, whatever data points you knew, kind of common sense wise that you had to use to monitor is there for you to use, and we're just finding aggregated view, right, a collective view of this is where the data has to live, and this is where I need to make my analysis so that I can share it back with my stakeholders. So your stakeholders at the end feel like they are also part of this journey, and they are not there thinking you are there just to help them save cost. You're actually doing ongoing monitoring on their behalf so that they can succeed at the end of the day. So it doesn't have to be daunting at all, right? It just sounds like you're doing a lot of work, but I think it's just a matter of deciding what's important to you, what data points you want to use, and let the data do the work for you, let the system do the work for you, and then you become the consumer of it at the end. Okay?
Makes sense.
Tom, that was it for me. Did you want to add anything, Tom?
No. I'm just thinking in terms of going back to my comment about supply chain visibility and that as being a popular source of information for logisticians to do close-level tracking. When you think in terms of systems like that, for example, have SKU-level visibility, again, in a risk context, how that information can be used to work around an issue, as an example, seems clear-cut, low-hanging fruit, so to speak, a perfect opportunity, a perfect context for strange bedfellows traditionally to get closer together and be able to report on metrics to a broader audience.
Well, thanks, guys. I do have a couple audience questions, if you don't mind if I move things along a bit. Is that all right, or were there more things to add? So, Tom, I just have a quick one for you. So this person in the background was talking about, with everything getting more sophisticated, advanced technologies, AI, all of that, supply chains are more mature. With that known, why is risk a big deal now?
Well, I think, and I touched on it, supply chains are becoming more brittle in a lot of expert opinion because they're being run much, much closer, more refined, more lean, more just in time. Think of the automobile analogy. I mean, we're moving away from a slow-moving gas hog to a Ferrari that allows us to be as agile as we need to be, and in those, carrying that analogy forward, things when they go wrong tend to be more catastrophic. And given the fact that the kinds of traditional buffers that we have used inventory to allow us to create workarounds, they're not there like they used to be. And so the brittleness I'm speaking of is generally associated with that. Everything is running much, much more like a fine Swiss watch. Something goes wrong. A risk enters the equation. The downstream effects seem to be felt much more quickly and much more severely.
So just kind of a follow-up question to that, are there other practices in procurement that have increased risk?
Well, for example, look at supply chain rationalization. The idea behind rationalization is that we're going to reduce the number of suppliers, deal with more cross-category suppliers, have more strategic relationships. That's where it's gone, and yet in doing so, companies have become more insular with regard to the market information that they might otherwise be aware of if they were dealing with a broader swath. They're not necessarily seeing some competitive trends that they might otherwise see. Revisiting supplier rationalization, just as a practice is probably appropriate. But in terms of risk, when you do the revisit, think of it in that context. It's something that we're doing a lot of work on in coaching at Spend Matters, where we talk to organizations that have rationalized to a point now where they feel as though they're falling out of touch, and they are. And in a risk context, we think, as I obviously mentioned, that it doesn't improve the situation, it degrades it.
Before I move on, Puana, you didn't have anything to add to that, did you? Or
I did actually. So what they could do, right? What else is changing? I think we are seeing this trend in procurement not being this isolated group, right? They are increasingly going to the stakeholders to say, what is your requirement, right? So we are seeing this trend in kind of a partnership model where they are not going, and their job is not just to find supplier, onboard them, and then on with it, right? Maybe do every now and then some QBRs. They're very much a partnership model where they are in ongoing conversation. They're looking at how are you doing with your suppliers. At the same time, a lot of companies are also a lot more transparent, right? There's a lot of transparency acts that they have to follow, where they have to disclose certain information about what type of business they do, who do they do business with, and they feel more and more responsible to their customers to actually show all the data points and what are they doing around certain risk mitigation strategies. So they have this two stakeholders, their external stakeholders who are their customers, and then internal stakeholders who also want to do a business with certain type of suppliers, right? So it's not always cost-driven. It's very much reputational. Sometimes it's a competitive edge they want to do. Sometimes it's a social message that you want to send about what you are doing. So procurement, being in the middle of it, is trying to balance a lot of these requirements that were not their requirements before. It used to be just save me money, right? It's around cost saving and make it more efficient. And now it's around not only do you do that, but also make sure you're managing risk. You're also partnering with the stakeholders. You're fulfilling our corporate missions around what type of business we want to be, helping us with our reputational risk. So they're being asked to do a lot, but I think procurement has also risen up to the challenge, right? So we see a lot of the customers who are there today, right? They are doing all of these own functions. They have moved beyond their traditional procurement just the supplier management and sourcing, and they have moved beyond that, right? They are this very powerful go-to group within the organizations, and I think they've done, their role has morphed, and they have adapted. They have used the tools that's available to get them there.
So before we move on, I just want to again invite the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to send them in. That's just in the widget console, in the console within your widget right there in Q&A. Go ahead and keep submitting those. We've gotten quite a few, and I have a few specific ones, Puana, if you don't mind, for you. So what kind of content is key to your risk management program is the question I have here.
Yeah, so generally we try to bucket them into this six broad areas, and this is kind of an industry standard. So you have to bucket it around your big political section. So you're going to monitor for different kind of risk, which is the political. Then you're going to do your economic or social, your technical and operational risk, your environmental risk, your legal risks. So you go through this bucketing process. And not every organization puts equal value in each of those buckets, but some of them do, and to get a kind of aggregate view on where they are. So once you identify, I'm going to focus just on these 6 broad categories, or maybe it's a very specific category of risk. You just want to focus first on economic, include financial data, then that's what you're going to focus on. But without doing that bucketing, really identifying what kind of risk you are going to tackle or monitor for on an ongoing basis, you're going to get to that again. Too much data, I don't know where to start, I don't know what it's even telling me stage. So to get out of that, right, we recommend that you start with that big bucket and determine as an organization, are you able to take on all of those 6 areas, or are you going to start in 1, 2, 3 incremental approach, and then have those data points and monitoring in place before you expand to others.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm just clicking into this right now.
Yeah.
So one other one for you, Puana. Are you doing ad hoc risk analysis?
Yeah, so unfortunately, right, a lot of us, we have the best intentions, but we end up just doing reactive work anyway, just because you never got to implementing this ongoing monitoring system where you want to be proactive, right? So it's this challenge of what you want to be versus what you are in your day-to-day life. So a lot of organizations do ad hoc, so they try to do maybe periodically, every 3 months or every quarter, or maybe it's every 6 months, maybe it's every month. They do go and do their ad hoc analysis of risk. It's a big step. You're going through massive chunks of data at one at a time to find what you're looking for. But a lot of those organizations do transform because it becomes this repetitive task. It requires a lot of manpower to say, if I'm doing this, multiple times a year, it's just not sustainable because I'm going through 20,000 suppliers, or maybe it's 10,000 suppliers. And then it's much easier for them to switch on to the ongoing monitoring program. But I think depending on your maturity and where you are as an organization, we do see that our customers do both.
All right, and I have one final question for you, Puana. Again, if anyone in the audience has any other questions, feel free to submit them. Otherwise, I think we might be ending a little early today, which, all right. But Puana, has your organization established ongoing risk monitoring programs? Has your organization? Yes, I think I read that correctly.
Yeah, I think I touched on it just briefly earlier, right? So there is, again, as let's just speak, if we were to speak for ourselves, right? There is the social responsibility, right? There's where we've said that we don't want to engage in business with suppliers that have, anti-bribery or this corruption practices. We want to have certain type of ethical business practices in place. And then you determine that's my organizational mission. That's what I'm going to focus on. There are customers who rely on low skill but high volume of labors, and they want to make sure that they're getting paid the fair wages, the living wage, and not just the minimum wage. So you determine what is your priority, what you want to live with, and then you're going to say, I'm going to have, this is my year where I'm going to focus just on social aspect of it. My second year, I'm going to focus on the environmental aspect of it. Depends on the nature of your business and what makes sense to you that year. Or it doesn't even have to be 1 year at a time. It can be multiples, and you're tracking over time how you're doing against those kind of risk. Because what it really enables you to do, this identification of risk, is to actually take it back to your supplier to say, this is who I am as a business, and this is what I don't want to deal with. But I am seeing from my data sources that you are engaging in certain behaviors, right? So it becomes a conversation point, so you either have mitigation plan in place, or you have your backup, right, your exit plan in place. So I think it's just depending on where you are today with your maturity. Don't take it all at once, all right? Start slow, start with your priority areas, and then increase from there.
Thank you so much. Tom, you didn't have anything to add, right? Otherwise, I think
no.
we're all right. Well, you guys, I just want to thank you, our speakers. That's the conclusion of our webinar today. I want to thank the audience for attending, our wonderful speakers, Juan and Tom, for truly, guys, a really great discussion. I also want to extend a huge thank you to LexisNexis for making today's event possible. We really can't put on events like this without the gracious support of our sponsors. And you know what? Just as I was concluding, we actually did get another question. So hold up. We're not done yet. Are there risk monitoring tools where a large amount of suppliers can be imported? Do you have any recommendations?
Sorry to like we were an hour. No problem at all. It's a really good question, right? Because I actually understand, and then having come from a supply management experience before, I actually get the weight of that question, because yes, you want to do the right thing, but you have 30,000 suppliers, 40,000 suppliers, and how am I going to do all this work, right? So, unfortunately, there are tools, right, and we provide one of those. Where you don't have to do it one at a time. It is a batched process. So what you are doing is giving your list of suppliers, and you are saying maybe it's you want to start at 500. Some of them have, we have customers who do 20,000. There is really no limit on what you want to monitor. It depends on your needs. And what you're doing is establishing that ongoing monitoring program based on the content source we provide as well. So we provide a variety of content to fit in your requirements. So we provide financial content, we have sanctions, warnings, watch lists, PEP, we have news data, we have license content that helps. So what you are doing is doing this data mining for your suppliers based on the host of content we provide. And it's a batched process, right? So you are doing it actually one time. You upload a big list of your suppliers. You set up the type of things they want to monitor. So maybe I usually start with an example of Dell, because most of us in our company, you might have a Dell-issued laptop, but your company within your IT group might have Dell-issued servers. So for day-to-day employee, you don't really have to worry about how is the server doing, right? You just want to make sure your laptop is okay. But you as a procurement might want to refine that to say, I do have Dell, but I buy goods from them as well as services from them, or maybe Amazon, right? You host some of your products in the Amazon cloud. You want to look at Amazon cloud, maybe not Amazon Prime, right? Because you are not a consumer at that point of consumer tools. So you are going to refine them, and you're going to say, these are the type of groupings I want to focus on. These are the type of key areas of goods and services I want to focus on for the supplier. And we have consulting services available that will help you determine what is the right way to get to what you want as far as the results goes. But it's very seamless, right? We have had customers go live in a week where they just give us a bunch of supplier names and they say, monitor this for me, please. And you upload them, and then you have your database pretty much populated within minutes, because there is just so much content that you can mine through. And in a minute, you're looking at patterns on oh, this supplier group just really is bad in the social aspect, but they are not so bad in the legal aspect. The other set of suppliers, really bad with environmental aspects as well as political aspects. So I need to do some digging into this. So you're able to get to that content very quickly without really having to do much integration from your side. So it is available, and we are sharing the page here for the product, right? So you can go to the LexisNexis.com Entity Insight, and you can. There is also the blog where we talk about various solutions, where either you are doing ad hoc or ongoing, we can direct you to the right products.
Tom, did you have anything to add to that question? Oh, go ahead, Puana.
No.
Oh, I was just saying, and if I did not answer the question properly, please, you can always reach out to me as well through my email that you will have access to, and then I can further put you in touch with our other experts.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
then, sorry, Tom, you said you were good?
No, all I would add is that there's a sense of community that is developing among solution providers, data providers. The notion that if certain companies in a segment are all trying to get on top of a certain area, instead of everyone repeating the process, there is some sharing, for lack of a better way of putting it, that's going on at certain levels for purposes of expediting the integration of these data and what they mean, not just to the buyer of the data, so to speak, but with regard to the interaction with key sources of supply that clearly extend beyond one organization in a segment, but to several. So interesting development. I don't know, Puana, if you're familiar with that, but as such a large, being such a large data provider, I have to imagine that you're familiar with what I'm referencing.
Yes, definitely, right? So it's almost to the point where we understand the end use case almost, right? So you cannot just say I have lots of data and just sit on it. And at the same time, you cannot say I'm a really good technology aggregator or analytics, or I can do a lot of this cool machine learning, predictive analytics. So this isolation has kind of gone away, and we've kind of realized, right, overall as an organization, the true value to our customer is to really merge that content and technology together. And that's when we become really powerful, and that's when procurement can really become the beneficiary of that work at the end. But you're right about the community, right? We talk more and more about partnerships, liaisons with various our own customers, right? They have their own in-house tools, our partners, but I do see that most of providers like us are in the same path.
Well, I've said goodbye before, but this might actually be the goodbye. We have no other questions from our audience. I just want to thank everyone once again, and that's the conclusion of our webinar. So have a lovely day.
Thank you, everybody, for the questions.